just want to welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out on this rainy day. But it's all good. Rain is always good for the soul. It brings sunshine after a while. So I'm going to open remarks. This is open remarks.
Just fine.
Okay. All right. So we just gonna keep on going. So first I'm going to do the introduction of our founder. The founder of A.R.I.S.E, Youth Mentoring, is a proud native of Frankfort, Delaware, whose journey has been shaped by resilience, compassion, and a deep commitment to making a difference in the lives of young people. Over 10 years ago, a vision was instilled, a dream to create a supportive community for youth facing the same challenges once experienced firsthand. Raised by a loving single grandmother, the founder understands the reality of overcoming bullying, limited social interaction, academic struggles, and even mental health concerns during childhood. Though the years have changed, many of these challenges persist for today's youth. Driven by personal experience and a desire to empower the next generation, the founder believes every child deserves a supportive village, to guide them into adulthood. Just as a village was needed then, so too is it needed now for our children to receive the tools and encouragement necessary to become thriving, capable young adults. Through A.R.I.S.E Youth Mentoring, this vision has come to life, offering guidance, support, and a hope for a higher future. Please give a round of applause for Ms. Tawana Van.
Again, I just want to say thank you for coming. Thank you for the speakers for taking time out of your schedules, everyone for taking time out of your schedules. Like she said, on this rainy day. But we are the sunshine today. And it really means a lot to me to bring this to Sussex County, to this area. Being raised in the town of Frankfort, I don't recall us really having a lot of resources. So my goal is to bring some resources. My goal is to bring some creativity to the youth and workshops and so forth to the parents, because it does start in the home. So we don't just want to focus on the youth, but this, for the most part, is for everyone. And the parents plays a big part in the role of the youth. So I'm believing to bring some great things to the community, to the area, to Delmarva. And I just want to thank you for your support, and leave here taking it wherever you are. And I'm believing that I can collaborate with a lot of you all here. So if you're in another township, we can take it there too. So we're going to start with our first speaker, and I'll just take it over. She'll take over. Thank you.
And then let's give her a round of applause. Alright, so our first keynote speaker, session is entrepreneurship, which is Miss Jalen Powell. She will share insights
I'm sorry. It's gonna be Khalil and Brandy.
Yes. Sorry.
The family dynamics.
Okay. So that's my mistake. All right. So our keynote speakers are Mr. Khalil. Okay. Mr. Khalil and Miss Brandy Walker. So these are the family dynamic questions. So they're going to be talking about different things, and we're going to have some Q&A for them both. So they can come on up, have a seat. with Miss Brandy Walker again, she will answer 2 or 3 questions that we have on here. So Miss Brandy, what are some effective strategies for fostering open and honest communication among family members?
I would say that you would definitely need to practice empathy, as well as being non-judgmental. I think those are definitely important pieces, just because many times if you think about children who, their parents are like, because I said so, or do as I say, not as I do. Those things all speak to, for a child, it closes off their ability to communicate to you and tell you things that are taking place in their world, because they're 1, afraid of getting in trouble, or 2, afraid of being judged. And so it just, right at the start, cuts off their comfortability in communicating with their parents about things that may be challenging for them. And so even with adults, we need to practice communicating with our children from a standpoint of just being open and honest. That's one thing I do with my 2 children, is explaining the world through my experiences, but also things that I haven't experienced that I think they would benefit from knowing, and not sugarcoating things. Because the reality is, at some point, our children are going to experience the world as is. And so we could do our part in exposing them to that through our conversations. That plays a big part. Another piece is, boundaries within families. That's very important, just from the standpoint of being able to respect each other's boundaries. Families are made up of individuals, and individuals are different in their own right, in their own way. And so being able to learn who each other is within their role in the family, and being able to respect those differences go a long way. So that's what I would say next up.
So this is for Mr. Khalil. What kinds of adjustments should be made when a family member returns home after being incarcerated?
So I work with families of people incarcerated. I work with people incarcerated, and I work with the children of people incarcerated. And I'm gonna give you some shocking numbers that you may not be aware of, and I'm gonna give it to you from a national perspective, and then I'm gonna give it to you from a local perspective. Because most of the times, people don't think about the overall impact incarceration is really having on children, right? We think about how it's impacting the adult, we think about how it's impacting the victims, but like the children become indirect victims, they become the secondary victims, and they often are the most vulnerable of the people that be involved in whatever the situation. So currently there's 1.25 million people incarcerated nationwide. Of that, 47% of them are parents to a minor child. And the statistics show, they do like census and things, that there are currently 1.25 million children nationwide that have a parent incarcerated. So the numbers are the same, right? The number of people incarcerated, the number of children that have a parent incarcerated. And when you go to prison, like everybody is doing time together. So when you think about it, you got 2.5 million people that are really incarcerated. The people that are there and the children. 33% of the people incarcerated, they had an incarcerated parent. So when you start thinking about like the family dynamics and the impact that incarceration has on the children, when you have 33% of people incarcerated, they had a parent that was incarcerated. So that is speaking to a generational impact, right? Of the people that are currently incarcerated, 3% of them have a child that is incarcerated at the same time that they're incarcerated, right? So now we're talking about generational things, like the system has created, we call them generational curses, but that's what it is. It's a generational impact of incarceration. I do a lot of work with the school system in the state of Delaware. I go to all the schools. I have a program that I do in the schools called Black Boy Laws, where I engage with the kids. 65% of the kids that I engage with in the schools have a parent that is incarcerated here in the state of Delaware. 30% of the kids that I engage with have already been arrested and charged with a crime. Right? So this is why I tell you I want you to think about it, because we're talking about family dynamics, and a lot of times we don't think about how incarceration is really changing our family dynamics, right? 95% of the kids that I engage with are all black and brown kids. So it's our communities that are being heavily impacted by incarceration and that are caught up in this generational cycle of incarceration. And when I talk to the men in prison, one of the things that I always tell them that incarceration does that we really don't consider is that it takes away our political and economic power in the community as well, right? Because oftentimes when you get charged with a felony, you can't vote, right? So you can't really have an impact. Politicians don't pay attention to us because they only pay attention to their voting constituency. So if everybody in this room can't vote, they're more reluctant to come and sit with us to talk about the issues that are important to us. So this is the impact that incarceration is having. In the state of Delaware, 38% of all homes are single family homes. So when you think about what I said earlier about the number of people incarcerated that came from single family homes, and those homes became single family homes as a result of incarceration. Delaware is no different. In the state of Delaware, 4,300 kids are arrested every year. This is a yearly thing, right? And the numbers haven't been going down. They just go up, right? So it's 4,300 children are arrested and charged for crime every single year. And I told you, 65% of the children I engage with have a parent that's incarcerated. And then when you think about it, 39% of the people that are incarcerated, they came from a single family home, right? So like this, when I'm talking to them and trying to prepare them for how they have to re-enter the community, I always have to start with the children first and understanding how our impact is having on our children and how we have unknowingly created a system that fosters our kids quicker to prison than it does to college, right? So when the adjustment that has to be made when you talk about people transitioning to the community, it doesn't start when they're getting out. It starts while they're in, and it's an adjustment to the mindset, right? It's adjustment to understanding the overall impact that we are having and trying to break up this generational pattern of mass incarceration that is impacting, unfortunately, black and brown communities. And all of these communities, the one thing that they have in common is poverty, right? Like, if you come from a community of poverty, you have a higher likelihood, like 10 to 1, of going to prison than you do of going to college. And for me, when I learned these statistics, it just made me more wanting to get involved with the schools and trying to figure out how we can break that cycle. Because as a juvenile, I went to prison as a juvenile, so I understand what that impact is, having lived it, and having, my mom was a single parent and she had to work 2 jobs. So she can't be there all the time to watch what we're doing because she's focused on trying to work, to try to make sure we got food on the table, we got a roof over our head, and it's when you're in that situation, it becomes even more difficult to parent, and unfortunately, this is what the results are.
That's a lot. It's sad, but it's a lot. It's a shame. So Miss Brandy, I have another question for you. Let's see here. How can families navigate generational gaps and differing perspectives to maintain healthy relationships?
I think the first thing is, again, that word empathy that I mentioned before. And then the second thing is curiosity. So being able to be curious and ask questions versus pushing what you know to be the right way. Because we all live in this world and we've seen how family dynamics have changed, but we also see the pressures of just societal changes on a family. Like Khalil mentioned, just, parents having to work. There's so many parents of kids that I work with whose parents are working 2 jobs or whose parents are just absent. And you have grandparents. I've been in this field for over 12 years now, and I've never seen so many grandparents raising children. And that's just become a thing. And so it's already doing a disadvantage to those children because they're not able to make those necessary connections to their parents, and they're always going to long for that both of their parents, they're always going to long for those interactions with them. And so you have grandparents who are older, unhealthy, so they can't do as much as the parents might have been able to do. So I would say you definitely have to have that curiosity. You have to be aware of what's taking place in the world today, how kids are navigating today. We have a lot of different resources just as far as therapy and things that can kind of help. Summits like this that a lot of parents or individuals don't necessarily take advantage of, but it can be very helpful, especially for those generational gaps, to gain an understanding of what's happening currently, what these children are facing. I always say with my children and all of our children today, technology has advanced so much today compared to when I was a kid. I just remember having a track phone. You couldn't really do too much on the track phone. I remember playing Snake and always having to wait until after 9 o'clock to even, call or text, because that was the free time. But now kids have so much access to YouTube, to TikTok, to just all these different things, to where they're constantly taking in different things that some of which they shouldn't really be exposed to yet. And I think that winds up being a challenging part, especially when you're talking about generational gaps, with older ideals, and I just mentioned that. So they didn't really have what's taking place right now and all the technological advances that are taking place right now. And so I think that's where the curiosity comes in, so that you can learn, again, what is taking place right now, how is that impacting the children now, and how is that impacting our family as well. Technology is good for many purposes, but it also has definitely increased the amount of individuals that are experiencing social anxiety, let alone COVID. COVID did its thing as well, because having people isolated inside their homes for long periods of times, during that time, that's where I mostly seen an influx of anxiety and depression with individuals, because they actually had to sit with their own thoughts. They actually had to sit with their own family. They couldn't go out and do different things. They had to just be within. And so I think those are the aspects that, as a generation, we have to stay informed, up to date, find out what resources are there to kind of help bridge that gap. Because like I said, there are a lot of grandparents that are taking care of their grandbabies, and not by choice. They feel it just kind of landed on them. And so I think that's very important. Even if it's not grandparents taking care of children, even if it's the parents, you still have to have some level of curiosity with your children to be able to learn them, because the world they're experiencing is different than the world I experience or they experience. So staying up with the times and being curious, asking questions, and knowing what's going on.
Mr. Khalil, so you had stated earlier that you were incarcerated at a young age. What was going on in your home or your surroundings that caused you to be incarcerated?
Wow, it was a lot. So my father was murdered when I was 14, and that pretty much sent me on a different path. Like I grew up with both my parents in the household, both my parents worked. There was no drug activity or any criminal activity or anything like that. My father was murdered. He was an innocent person using a phone, using a payphone. It made me feel old when he was talking about track phones because that didn't exist when I was young. None of that existed.
Right.
You know, most we had was a pager. You had a beeper or something, but and they had payphones, right? Just by every corner. And my father was using a phone to call a job, and somebody shot him. So, you know, that sent my life on a spiral because now my mother was suddenly a single parent that has to work 2 full-time jobs to make ends meet, and I was 14, right? So with me, my brothers, and my younger sisters, it just became more difficult. We didn't have anyone to help us process the emotions. Back then, that wasn't the norm. Now it is the norm because a lot of the kids that I talk to have the same exact experience that I had. Their father was murdered, running in the streets, and no one is helping them process the emotions. So when I was 17, I went to prison, and I had a natural life sentence plus 5 years, right? And it was a direct result of all of that. You know, I spent 25 years incarcerated from the age of 17 to 42. So I had an up-close view of the impact that it all has on you when you don't have that support and you don't have anyone that can help you. So I do a lot of times talking to the kids really about processing their emotions because of the absence of the parents and because of the in a single parent home and now they have to work. What's interesting when you say about the grandparents, like 13% of the kids they were being raised by their grandparents just so that they don't end up in foster care, right? Because the parents are incarcerated. So the grandparents step in, but they don't have the energy or the time to do all of the stuff that's needed for a lot of the little kids. So like I really have to help them process their emotions. That's the biggest thing they always bring up to me is how do I process my anger? How do I do these things? Because the quick fix is violence, and that's how I grew up. The quick fix when I got angry was to go upside somebody's head, without considering the overall consequences of what happens. Right? Like we never thought that someone can possibly die when you do these things. So now I have to bring that to their attention because of my own personal experience and trying to figure out how do we end this cycle, right? I teach a class in the prisons called the Impact of Crime on Victims. So I go through all the prisons in the state and I go back in and I teach this class and the experience that I've had that has become more common is I'll have a father in this class and then in another institution I'll have their son in my class, right? And there's times where I've been in the same institution and the father and son would be cellmates, and that's the first time that they was able to meet and get to know each other, and trying to figure out how do we change this dynamic? How do we get men to understand how vital their role is in the raising of their children? Because most men don't know and they don't really understand because they were young. I had my first son when I was 16. I didn't know what to do, how to be a father, right? And because of all the anger that I had of losing my father, it made it even more difficult for me to connect with my son. So, just trying to navigate all of those things and help the kids. Though you have a lot of individuals that are willing to step in and be mentors, but it's not the same thing, right? It really isn't the same thing. And I'm gonna share this last thing. I was at a school on Wednesday, and after I was done talking, I had a 16-year-old kid came up to me. His father just came home after doing 10 years. And this kid carries a lot of anger towards his father, right? For whatever reasons that he wanted, but he has a lot of anger towards his father. He doesn't want to talk to him. He doesn't want to hear from him, right? He's like, he keeps trying to be my dad, but where is he at for 10 years? And, just trying to help him navigate those things because like he's a good kid. He makes good grades and everything. The father doesn't understand, right? Or if he understands, he's not willing to acknowledge what his absence has done to his son. He thinks his son should just welcome him back and say, Dad, I love you, you are here. He doesn't understand, like, he had to grow up for 10 years without you. He had to become his own person without you, right? He doesn't identify with you, so that becomes the difficult part in trying to navigate all of those things. And for me, it just comes from my personal experience. Because my dad was my hero, right? So even today, I'm 50, and everything I do came from what I saw my dad doing and watching my father. The way I am with my sons and in my household and my grandchildren comes from me seeing how my dad was and the example that he set, and I just try to do the same exact things.
Another question I have for you. So you say you go to schools. What age do you start talking to them, and what is your success rate as far as getting the father-sons bonding back together?
So the age is determined by the school. That's not determined by me.
Okay.
The school will just reach out to me and say, can you come? We have some kids, and like I have a presentation I do, and then I can do groups with them. So it'll range. The age range anywhere from 10 to 17.
Okay.
Right, in that age range. As it relates to the father, so the prison has done things to try to make communication with families, I don't want to say easier or better, but that's just what it is. So you can get video visits, they can text, they can do all of those things. The problem comes in if you have a parent that's out there that doesn't want the child to visit the father. Right? Like, this is a real thing where the mom might say, no, I don't want you talking to your father. For whatever her feelings is toward the father, she's not thinking about how it's impacting the child. It's just about her feelings toward the father, and she'll say, no, you can't talk to him, you can't visit, stop calling. That becomes difficult. So I never look at it as it relates to like a success rate. I just try to, if I have opportunity to talk to the mother, to point out some things to her, because the child isn't as open as they are with me. So trying to create a safe space where the child can talk about what's going on with them and how not having that contact with the father is impacting them. And then the other thing I have to do is when I talk to the guys and when I talk to the women at the women's prison, I try to get them to change the conversation, because oftentimes it's not a healthy or productive conversation. They rarely say, how are you doing? Like, how are you feeling? And they rarely try to have the child feel safe being vulnerable talking to them. And it's difficult when you're doing it, FaceTime and all that stuff. But if you consistently do it, you can and have those conversations. So I never look at it as a result of a success rate. I just try to get them to change how they communicate and the frequency at which they communicate. Now, the barriers are financial because they're not free, but it'll, when I was incarcerated, all we had was letters, right? That's all we had was letters and 2 10-minute phone calls a week. Now, every phone call is 15 to 30 minutes. It's unlimited. They can sit in their room and text and video visit and talk. So the dynamics have changed to allow for better communication. It's just, are you taking advantage of the communication to connect with your child so that you don't have as much animosity when you're making the transition out into the community. So that's when I say it has to start with the mindset in prison and how we really connect and communicate. And it's not just boys. And I want to say this because oftentimes we focus on the boys. I run into it more with the girls than the boys. Right? Like, it's a different generation of girls out here now. It's different, man. They're a piece of work. And, the father thinks it's the mom's job. And I'm like, nah, you play a role in this as well, because you don't realize how your impact, your role is gonna impact how she interacts with men, how she's treated, what she allowed to talk to, you know, and I said to someone the other day, I was talking to one of my coworkers, and I said, man, when I was growing up, I used to hear this all the time. That's not ladylike, you know, cross your legs, you don't sit like that. I haven't heard that in 8 years. I've been home, I have not heard one person say that to a young lady. That's not ladylike. You know, when you got a skirt on, cross your legs, you don't sit like that. You don't talk like that, things of that nature. And I think that that is also creating an issue with the family dynamics, because then they end up parents young, and because no one is pouring into them like that, they don't know how to pour into their kids.
So Miss Brandy, I have a question for you. What communication issues often occur in families? In families during transitions like marriage, divorce, major life issues, a new child, how can they be resolved?
So I think a big one is like unexpected expectations. And I see that unexpected, unspoken expectations. So in life changes and transitions such as that, a lot of times individuals in a family, their role, whatever their role may be, they assume that certain things should take place. So children assume that things should take place from, or they should receive certain things from their parents, and vice versa. That happens. To Khalil's point, even that transition, incarcerated individuals, like I'm a child, a product of an incarcerated father who was in and out of jail. He had his own drug issues, and that's part of the reason why I became a counselor, because when I hit 20 and I was sophomore at Dale State, and that's when he had lost his life because he had his own psychotic break on the road, and then it was a horrific accident. I learned from my own mom that he had suffered from depression. And I knew a lot of that was stemming from his own family, because they had a dynamic of, you know, if you aren't showing up in the way that we want our family to be viewed, then they essentially cash you out. And then they don't support you. And then the fact that he had a drug issue and then he's in and out of jail, that's completely going against the dynamic that they wanted people to see. So he didn't have that support. And so that's another piece. So when he passed, and when I was 20, one of the things that was missing, that was a transition, but nobody checked in with us as kids. So we never talked about it. We kind of all went into our own silos and just kind of grieved it however we felt best to grieve it for ourselves. One of the things that to this day that I feel like would have been beneficial, because I have a younger brother, and at that time he was 10. He was 10 when he passed. And so I really felt like if we had came together, checked in. That's another skill. Check in with your children. You know, how was your day? What's going on? That curiosity. What's happening in your world? Let me learn from you. I really feel like if we had checked in with each other, had some conversations with each other about how this has really shook us up, how we felt about it, and all of that, my brother wouldn't have found comfort in individuals that were running the streets. That's where he found his safe place, you know. Until this day, his go-to is, you know, let me drink my pain away. And I've expressed that to him because it impacted us all in different ways. There are things even from my own childhood with just my dad's experience, having to make sure I lock my bedroom door, keeping things on me while I sleep because he's looking for things to sell for his drug habit and stuff like that. So there's those things to have to grow up like that and do that on a repeated cycle. In adulthood, no doubt, I would still be doing the same thing because that's a place of comfort. That's a place of comfort. So even those impacts when we talk about family dynamics, whether there's someone transitioning out the home, whether it's someone in the home, and the home is dysfunctional and toxic. All of those things are gonna impact a kid's overall well-being and how they function and show up in this world. So even as an adult, there were a lot of things that I noticed that were showing up in my own marriage because, one, I didn't have my dad, to Khalil's point. I didn't have my dad. That would have been my first male love, right? He would have been the one that showed me how to love or how somebody should love me. And missing that piece, it was almost in my own marriage, it was like I'm pushing you away because I'm bringing my anger from back here when I was a kid into this current place. And that's an unfamiliar thing. I don't know what that's supposed to look like and feel like. So now I'm having to battle that and also be present currently and try to function there. So when it comes to, the communication is like the biggest piece. A lot of things don't get resolved, don't get addressed because we don't talk about it. And to some people's, benefit, some people don't know how to talk about it. There are so many heavy things that, happen in families. The biggest hurts happen in families. People used to always tell me about, that saying family over everything. And I legit despise it. Because at the end of the day, if your family is not healthy for you, you have to do what you gotta do to put the boundaries in place for yourself so that you're not further getting harmed or impacted in a negative way. Our families can keep us really, really trapped depending on the healthy function of it. And again, to Khalil's point, that keeps a cycle going, a cycle of dysfunction, a cycle of toxicity. So, and my mom used to yell at us, and I always would see my mom and dad argue. Those were the memories I could really remember. So having memories of seeing a couple loving on each other, supporting each other, having disagreements and then fixing them, I completely missed that. So of course, quite naturally, what am I going to do in my own marriage? I'm going to initiate arguments. I'm going to push back because that's what I'm used to. That was my place of comfort. So if I'm bringing that here, I'm comfortable because I grew up in it. And so even as an adult, those are things that I had to learn in reverse. I didn't even realize the impact and the severity of how much all of that impacted me and continues to impact me. So there could be days I'm just like, oh my gosh. It's like an aha moment because it's like, oh, how is that connected to that? Or why am I doing that? And then I have to put the pieces together. And that's generally what happens. So I really feel like, during those transitional periods, whether it's divorce, whether it's someone leaving the home or anything like that, the communication and those check-ins, they are very important. So that everybody's on the same page. And I don't care if you don't have the words to say. Just being able to communicate and say, like, how are you feeling? Because this is how I'm feeling. And so that transparency, like I mentioned before, between parents and children and all of that, that is so important because for you to pretend like the world is all gravy because you don't want your children to hurt or you don't want them to feel sad is unrealistic and you're setting them up. If we don't show them, I cry in front of my children because the reality is life sometimes is hard. Things get overwhelming. And I want them to know that that's the reality of life. And sometimes you gotta just cry, let it go, and they'll see me. They see me go through those flow of emotions because that's the real. That is the real. And I will talk to them about my experiences and how they're showing up now. I'll tell them everything? Not yet. They're a little younger. But just even that, I have to be very conscious of that with my own parenting. Hearing my mom yell, that was something I brought into raising my children. And then my husband was like, okay, I'm gonna need you to stop yelling. And that was something that I had to take in. and say, you know what, yeah, because why am I doing that? But I'm doing that because that's what I was shown. That's what happened. And so now I don't do that because it just doesn't make sense. But that's how powerful family dynamics are. The way you grow up, what you see, how things are done with you, if anybody checks in with you or not, because the reality is, it doesn't happen. I heard TJ mention this before, it starts at home. If it doesn't happen there, it's going to be found somewhere. It just may not be in the way that the most healthiest way. So those are the things, the big highlight I would say is you have to check in with children, with all of that, and create that transparent interaction with them.
So I have a question. Being that you said, your parents yell, why do, I'm gonna say black people, we yell at our kids? Why do we do that? And then I remember growing up, my grandma used to say, when one gotta be in, everybody gotta be.
Yeah.
Why do we do that? As black people, why do we feel we need to yell at our children?
Yeah.
Why do we feel, you're gonna be everybody? I mean, I didn't do that with my children, but I did yell at them sometimes because I felt like, if you're not listening when I'm talking calmly, then I feel like I need to raise my voice. Why do we feel we need to yell at them to get them to hear?
Did they listen when you raise your voice?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
They did. When you give them the mom look, and you like, then they straighten up. But then, why do we feel like, we need to yell, at our children?
You know what? I think the time I cut that off for myself was the time where I felt like I was yelling so much that I felt like I was going to lose a heart attack.
Oh my goodness.
And from that moment, I said, absolutely not. Like, if they are not doing what they need to do, I'm not about to die to try to get them to do whatever it is. And so I think it's coming. That part of that comes from frustration. I can speak for me. If I'm repeating something over and over again and you're not doing it, at some point I get frustrated. And instead of taking a moment away to kind of bring myself down, most of the times we're just pushing it out in that moment. And so what I have learned to do is, okay, I got to check in with myself. And that's one thing I always have to do, and I think that's beneficial. How am I feeling right now? Because sometimes it's not the frustration that our children may be, causing. Sometimes it's just the frustration and overwhelm of whatever is happening in our life at that moment. And sometimes us as parents, we project that to the children. So if we got something going on, or somebody made us upset at work, or stressed out about bills and all of that stuff, that's not the children's fault. But a lot of times we project that onto the children because them not cleaning up or picking up or whatever is just adding onto the stress that we already feel. And so you really have to take a step back and check yourself with the other things that's probably flowing around for you subconsciously that's influencing how you actually feel.
Yes, sir. Because I was gonna say, with single moms, raising our children, we have to yell. I had both my parents in my home, so my mom would say, "I'm done. I'm telling you that. I'm calling you dad." So then we like, we straighten up. So from a dad perspective,
it's funny because my wife does that. My son, she'll be like, "I'm gonna tell your dad," and I always say, "Stop making me the bad guy. Like you just keep making me the heavy. I don't want him to view me as just that, right? I don't want him to view me as just a disciplinarian, right? And I don't curse. I don't yell at my son. Like I don't do that, right? Like I can talk sternly to him without yelling at him. He understands where I'm coming from. But I'm gonna tell you, because it's something that you said that's key. We communicate how we learn to communicate, right? So if you're a parent that always yell, your children gonna yell. They're gonna yell at their kids because that's all you do until they decide to do something different. Where you became aware of it, you decided to do something different. But one of the things that I've learned over the course of years and studying is behind all of it is an underlying fear. Where it comes from a fear, because we operate from a place of fear with our kids in some instances, because it's like we know what's going to happen if you don't listen to us, because we've seen it or already experienced it, and we're trying to keep them from having to go through it, right? So we were like, you need to listen to me because, right? Kids don't really understand that. They don't know that if I do this, they don't know that we know what is going to happen, right? They don't believe us. So part that motivates us on a really deep subconscious level is that it's a fear. I'm telling you to stop doing this because if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. We don't tell them this is going. We just want them to stop and listen to us, right? When it comes to school and their grades, we know what happens if they don't listen, if they don't get their grade, and our fear is that they are going to become what we see out here that we don't want. So we keep trying to divert them back. They don't see it like that. They just kids living in the world and trying to experience the world the way they want to experience the world, and they don't think we know anything. Like, really, kids don't think we know anything. They don't look at you. You can tell them, like, my son is 7, and he's a very intelligent and aware little boy. But one of the problems that I have with him is because he thinks he knows everything and he can figure it all out. And then sometimes I'll tell him, hey, you might not want to do that. And he'll like, just leave me alone. Let me. Then I'm just, and I'll learn to just take a step back and I'll just watch. And as long as he's not hurting someone or hurting himself, I'll just sit back and watch. And then when it happens, he'll be like, can you come help me, or can you do this? And I had to stop parenting from a place of fear, right? Because ultimately this it will come from. Like, I don't want my son to experience the things that I've experienced. I don't want him to have to go through those things, right? And we have to, like, in some instances, we have to back off and communicate differently. People tell me all the time I sound like my mom. The only difference is I don't curse and I won't yell. Like, people like, man, you sound just like your mom. My mom, if my mom curses, then I already know it's really serious, right? Like, I know it's great go down. If she say MF, then it's really going down, right? When it escalates there, right? If she's not using your name and you become black this or skinny that, like when she starts describing you versus using your name, I knew it was serious, right? Like, seriously, like my mom and my family was all like that. If they describe you when they address you versus using your name, then you in trouble, right? So I've had to reverse that, because I don't want to do the same thing, right? And if you ask my son, like, what does daddy say all the time? And he'll be like, boy, because the first thing I say to him when I'm trying to get his attention, I'll be like, boy, and I'll catch myself, because I might said it 10 times in the past 30 minutes. Like, boy, stop, or boy, you need to come here, and he's gotten so used to it. He knows when I say it, I need him to come and listen to what it is that I have to say. But what I don't do though is I won't curse at him. I don't raise my voice at him, because I don't want him communicating like that, and I don't want him to think that it's okay, right? I don't want him to think it's okay to just curse at somebody. I don't want him to think that because you're upset you can hit. All of those things. These are things that I saw growing up, and I know how they impacted us. Right, so I'm like, I have a cousin. One time we was at a family event. We were all outside, and I can hear her yelling at her son. And he's sitting down, and she just yelling and screaming at this little boy. And I went in, and I was like, can you please stop yelling at him like that? We can hear you all the way outside. And she's like, don't tell me how to raise my son. I said, listen, I need you to stop yelling at him. It's not necessary, right? They're not really listening to you once you start doing it. You think they are. We think they listen to us. Actually, they're not. They're not. They tune us out because they don't want to be yelled at, right? Like, we scaring them on something. We just project. We putting our fears into them. They're not listening. And I'm looking at him, and he really didn't do anything, right? And to your point, a lot of things that in our families, what happens that create these dynamics is, like, we say, my mom is a big thing. When we out in public, don't show your tail. Right? Like, all of those different things. They be like, man, when you out, you better not show your tail. I'll take you over to somebody's house. So we knew we had to be on our best behavior, right? I still see that in a lot of my cousins. They're all like, don't be out in public showing your tail because we're gonna have a problem. I'll snatch you up, right? And I'm like, come on, man, don't do it. We gotta figure out something different because they're gonna associate that with that. That the only way I can solve this problem, the only way I can correct you is I gotta grab you up and I gotta do all these things. And that's how we started doing it, right? My mom had a big thing. If you out and there's something going on, and she'll be like, don't come home crying, right? Like, you better stay out there and don't be running in my house crying. You better stay out there and deal with it. And I used to be like, man, I had a more fear of going home to my mom if something happened than it was just something happening out here. Because I was like, man, I can't go in the house crying, man. Like, it's going to be a problem, you know. And she'd be like, you going to fight him or you fight me? And I'm like, all right, man, you going to have to fight. Because I don't want to fight my mom. So they don't understand what that does to us because that's how they parented and they grew up in a different era, right? Where now, society now, you can't teach kids those things. You can't give them those things. Like, it is really dangerous and it's hard for kids. You can't keep giving them those same messages because the only result is somebody's going to lose their life. It's not going to be a fight. Our parents thought it was just going to be a fight, and then you come home, you lick your wounds, and you go. It's not like that anymore, right? So you can't keep giving them those messages. You can't keep saying, you know, don't come home crying. I'd rather you come home crying and we deal with it than you stay out there and try to do this on your own because now it's resulting in a loss of life. This is how the kids are dealing with stuff. And with social media influences and all that stuff, it makes it even worse. Right? So, you know, we grew up in different eras, but the amazing thing is our experiences is the same. Right? Like, it's the same. We going through the same different things and we having the same impact. We just now and today in 2020, you cannot give kids those messages. They don't understand it. It's not going to be dealt with cross this line and watch what happens, or, you know, knock the stick off my shoulder and all. None of that stuff applies. None of it applies anymore because now there's bullets. That's all it is. It's just bullets, bullets, bullets. So it's not going to be you cross this line, I'm going to fat your lip, all this other. It's going to be you say something to me, I'm going to shoot you. Yes. So everything has gotten so extreme, and it's just, and it is sad when you think about it because we're not talking about adults. We're actually having a conversation about children, right? Us as adults, we play a role in it, but we're having a conversation about children. And now, in today's society, everything is resulting in a loss of life. That's it. It's not resulting in anything else but the loss of life. You know, the news yesterday, we were talking about a shooting. A kid got shot, right? And if we continue to give those messages, it's not going to change. You know, it's not going to change. And I have like a 3-part formula. I always tell people. I tell adults these 3 things. The first thing is you have to suspend judgment when you see kids, because we label kids when we see them and when they're out on the corner, all this stuff. The first thing you got to do is suspend judgment, because if you don't suspend judgment, you're not going to communicate with those kids. If you just see them out there and you say they up to no good, or them bad kids out there again, you won't talk to them, you won't engage them. It just becomes a barrier. So we have to suspend judgment immediately when we're dealing with kids. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know what they're going through. Our kids are experiencing trauma at a level that we've never experienced in our life. It's not good. It's not good. Our kids are growing up like they live in war-torn countries, right? Like, that's the impact. So we have to first start off, we got to suspend judgment in order to be able to engage with kids. You have to. The second thing is, as a community, we have to find things for the kids to do. If you don't want them on a corner, give them something to do, right? I told you the percentages of single-family homes. One of the things that comes with single-family homes is finances or strain, right? So you don't have the money to do a lot of things, so kids think they got to go out here to find ways to get money. You gotta come up, it can't be just the summer youth and give them a job in the summer. Like, we have to come up with things that kids can do Because some of them want to earn money because they want to be able to either get food, they want to be able to get clothes, they want to be able to do these things. And, you know, like I had my first job delivering newspapers when I was 14, right? That was my first job. I had a paper route. I don't see that anymore. Like all those dynamics change. So we as a community have to come up with things for the kids to do. If you don't want them on the corner, if you don't want them fighting, give them something to do, right? Like actively, and if you don't suspend judgment, you're not going to give them something to do because you're going to just close the door on them and say, it's not my problem, I don't want to deal with it. And it won't be your problem until it is your problem, right? Until you're going to be one of them parents that's on the news crying, I need somebody to tell me who shot my baby. You're going to become that parent. So you have to give them something to do. And then the third thing, what you just said becomes the most important thing. How are you doing? Is everything okay? Right? Like create a safe space that when you ask a child how they're doing or what's going on, that they will tell you. And they feel comfortable telling you. Because if you don't do it, they just stuff it. They just stuff it. We come from a generation of stuffers. Our parents used to tell us, don't cry or I'm going to give you something to cry for. Only thing it taught us to do was stuff our feelings. It taught us to stuff our feelings. So we have to give kids permission to cry. It's okay. It doesn't mean you soft. It doesn't mean all these things. Allow our kids to cry, express emotion, but we create an environment where they can feel comfortable doing it, feel safe doing it, and they're not judged. And then we can say, what's going on? How are you doing? And walk them through that. Those three things we have to do or there won't be change. We have to suspend judgment as adults because so many of us, that's what we do. We label these kids, we judge them, and it just makes us not want to deal with them. And it's just, and it's continuing the loss of life where when you're not judging them, you're more willing to engage. I see kids all the time when I speak to them, they look at me like I'm crazy because they're not used to that. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? You know, good morning and good afternoon. And I'll just keep it going like that. And I'll just say, how are you doing? Right? Most of them don't know. They don't know how to answer the question. But when you do it enough, guess what they're going to do? They're going to start telling you. And don't be the person that you only doing it hoping that they don't tell you what's really going on because you got to do something about it. Because a lot of times, some people do that. They do it to us as adults. They say, you all right? They don't really want you to say you're not all right. They're just saying it because they think it's just to keep it moving, right? But when you say it, if they tell you that they're not all right, have a plan in place to be able to really address them. The resources that y'all talked about, be able to direct them to resources and things of that nature, because if we don't start doing those things, nothing will change. Those are the three things that we have to do in order for it to change, because if not, these are going to be our experiences. And you have it from a female perspective, I have it from a male's perspective. And it all started with dad. Right? That's the common thing. It started with dad. So if you just look at us and see, you just got the female perspective, you got the male perspective, this is the reality that's going on out there, right? We had to do the work as adults, where we need to start having to do the work as kids so that they don't have to do it as adults, right? So, and that's the thing, we did the work as an adult, right? And we had to discover all these things about us. It's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable when you're doing that work. Let's start doing it with them while they're kids. Make them uncomfortable now. If you want to stop, like seriously, make them uncomfortable. So, you know. But it's a heavy lift and it's kind of heavy, but that's it. Those are the things that we have to do if we really want things to be different.
Okay, so we're going to open the floor at this time. If anyone has any questions for them, you can do so now.
I didn't have one question. You got question.
You be getting it in. Been watching it all the time.
I'm a writer. Like I like maximizing my time and some of the wealth of information. But both of you talked about the importance of having like a male figure as a father and the role of a father. As a community advocate, someone who works with kids, I understood fairly quickly that my calling is young girls and women, and not necessarily for anything but I realize when it comes to men, I'm not saying women can't impact men, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is I learned and I noticed that young men took a better liking or felt safer talking to male figures. And the problem is we don't have a lot of male figures that are going in outside of yourself, that are going into the schools, that are going into the communities and being that positive role model. And as women, I think innately we're wired to be first responders. Like we see a problem, we want to fix it. So how can we encourage more men to do that boots on the ground community work? Is my question.
It's difficult because as men we're taught to be providers and protectors throughout our lives. That's what they tell us, right? We're not natural nurturers. In order to do that, we have to learn how to nurture, right? We're just not natural nurturers. That's not how we're wired, to just be nurturing in that instance. And I think that, and I know a lot of men that do this, and it's a movement to get men with lived experience to try to come in and do it, because they more willing to listen to somebody that has lived experience than not. So I think to get more men involved, it just has to become a thing where it becomes important to them. Honestly, you can't just come and say, hey, listen, why don't y'all come out and do this, that, and third. If it's not important to them, it's not important to them, right? It just has to become important to them. And unfortunately, the ones that is important to have already been to prison and had that experience, right? Where they got their awakening during 2 decades or a decade and a half in prison. They had to get their awakening and see, yeah, I gotta figure out how to do something different, right? In the community, because of the societal norms of just be a protector and a provider, it's difficult to get those men to come out, right? I know a lot of men that are positive in the community, but they don't do that because they just talk about being a provider, being a protector. The men that I see that do that, or the one thing they all have in common is they've been to prison. They know what the other side looks like, and they don't want to see other kids do it. So I would say try to connect with men like that, right, and pull them in because they have the experience, and figure a way to make it important to them. You have to make it important to them. If you don't make it important to them, they're not going to come. Like, honestly, they're just not going to do it because it's just not important, right?
I would pull on whatever their expertise is. And I say that just because my husband's a musician and he has done different workshops, maybe at like after school programs and stuff like that. And so that's something that he's already tapped into and comfortable with. And so he'll pour into, you know, males and stuff like that in that moment. But that almost sets them up to be able to do that. So if you're getting, you know, if you're doing something, you're having males and you identify some males that have a certain expertise, I don't care what it is, construction, whatever the thing is that they love to do. Yeah, sports, all those different things, bringing them in from that aspect, I think you could probably pull more men to do that. And so it's not, I think the difference with men is definitely, it's like when you get them in the space, you can go a lot of different ways. It's just getting them in the space.
That's what I said. It's not, if you don't make it important to us, it's not going to be important. Like if I love basketball, that's something important to me, right? You can probably get me more involved in something that's involved in basketball because I'm comfortable with it, I understand it, than if you try to get me involved in something in soccer. I might just be standing there on the sideline just watching, don't know what to do, right? And what you said, what's interesting about that is we use that as our language to communicate, right? So that's a way that we are able to communicate on an entirely different level, and we can turn it into different things. You know, like you can take an instrument and you can use that to connect it to so many different things, you know, the musical notes, all of that stuff when you're doing it, and you can have a conversation without having a conversation. They have no idea what we're
Exactly.
talking about, but I'm using music to connect with you, and you'll open up about some things, right? As far as life. So you gotta make it important to us, and that's what it comes down to. If it's important to me, it'll be important to me. If you don't make it important to me, it's not. If you just want me to come in a room and sit down and talk, and most men, we are not comfortable doing it. We're not gonna do it. We're not gonna just walk in the room, sit down, and have a conversation. You make it important to us.
Anyone else?
Well, I don't have a question, but I just want to comment on the dialogue because it was relatable for me because I didn't have my biological mother or my father in my life. And when I listen, it helps me understand why I did some of the things I did. Like I felt like emotionally, I wasn't emotionally mature, emotionally stable. I felt like that's the reason why I screamed at my kids. I just feel like it's never too late, you know what I'm saying? Because you're always going to be a parent. So whether you got it right when they were younger, you can make it right now because I even apologize to my children. Once I realize the error, I apologize. And I feel like as parents we should do that.
Yes, for sure. That's very important. That's the transparency I was talking about. Because we don't know. We're parents for the first time. We're going to make mistakes and we take different things that we learn, whether healthy, unhealthy. But when you come to the wherewithal, you're also teaching your children that yes, accountability. You're not going to do everything right, and it's okay. Just go ahead and take accountability with it, apologize, and move on.
I do have something to say. I know as a single parent, I did yell at my kids a whole lot, but not as much because my kids were actually very good kids. But now that my oldest daughter is a parent, she yells at her children. And it annoys me. It really does. It frustrates me because then I yell at her and I'm like, why are you yelling at them when they're standing right there? Well, Mom, they're not listening. But still, all you have to do is talk to them. And that's what I do. I mean, I'm a grandma, so. And I love my grandbabies. And I get offense, the wall starts coming up because I'm like, why are you yelling at them? And she's in this situation where she's a single mom. The dad is in and out. So how can I help her to not yell at her kids because my grandson is 10 and he doesn't like to be yelled at. He never liked to be yelled at. And my granddaughter, she's just a different breed. Honestly, I think I tell her all the time, girl, you've been here before. Because she's very, 4 and she's very, very smart. She's very independent. She likes to do everything on her own. So how can I help my daughter not to yell when she didn't get yelled at like she's yelling at her kids?
Did you hear what you just said? You said you watched her yell at her children, and then you yelled at her.
Yes. But I'm yelling at her because I'm frustrated because she's yelling at them. I know, but because I'm like, why are you yelling at them? I didn't yell at you like that, so why are you yelling at them?
You keep saying it like that. But you did. You keep saying it like that.
I know.
What you did was minimal compared to what she did. She didn't view it like that.
Okay.
When you did it, she didn't take it like that. She took it as she doing the same thing you did to her. Right? And Brandy said something is important in the beginning, right? About the work she had to do when she realized she was doing. You have to encourage your daughter to do that work.
Okay.
That's the only way it's changed. She has to be willing to do the work and gotta be open to
You
it.
have to model it. So if you model that with your grandbabies, and then you model that with her.
Okay.
So it may not be, let me address this in front of the grandbabies, it may be like, hey, come over here.
I have a
Yeah,
suggestion.
but that's so important. Like my son, him and his girlfriend argue a lot in front of my granddaughter, right? And my granddaughter, she withdraws. They don't see it. She like really withdraws. I don't yell in my household. I don't do any of those things. So she's freer, right? Like she's freer. You can tell. And I have to tell them, like, y'all, you have to stop doing that in front of her because it's having an impact. Y'all don't see it because you just around her all the time. You think it's her normal. No, I've seen her when she's not with y'all. She's an entirely different person, right? And I'm like, the mom will blame it on my son. And he plays a role in it. He plays a big role in it. He drives her crazy. He does. He drives her crazy. He doesn't think he's doing it, but he does. He drives me crazy. I just don't respond the way she does, right? And I always tell him, I said, y'all communication is not healthy, right? Y'all communication consists of two things. Y'all yell and scream at each other, then y'all have sex to think that it's making up for the yelling and the screaming, right? And y'all think that y'all got a healthy relationship. It's just so toxic. It's just arguments, then sex, and y'all think that makes it all better, and y'all never dealt with the situation. She sees all of this, and I always try to get them to understand, like, listen, that's how she's going to have relationships if you don't fix it now. And I've had to talk to them about going to counseling, and they've agreed to go to counseling because that's what you have to do. Because it may not come from you. It's going to have to come from somebody else for your daughter to understand, right? Like she has to be willing to do the work to realize, like, I don't have to communicate like that, right? And if you get her to do the work, and I was so happy when they agreed to go to counseling. And because I knew as a parent, they're not going to receive it from me the way they will from somebody else. And that's what you have to get them to do. Get her to do it. You get her to go to counseling. I'm a big believer in counseling. I think it works. I know it's not something that we typically do in our community, but I'm trying to tell you, like, it works because you doing it is not going to help because you just said, you yell at her. That's all you do. So you've turned off communication and you think it's going to change her behavior by you yelling at her, but it's not. She's yelling at them. It's not changing the behavior. It's like, it's this whole cycle. Y'all just keep yelling. And the kid is just sitting there like,
because my granddaughter will say, "Why are y'all yelling?" She don't hear. She will say, "Y'all are yelling, please." And so I'm like,
she's
okay.
telling you.
And this is the 2-year-old. Ain't she 2?
4.
She 4. Oh, she's 4.
Yeah.
But let me tell you.
Your daughter is going to have to do the work that Brandon talked about doing when she became away. Like, you have to get her to do that work so that she can do something different. Because coming from you, because you yelling, trying to get her to understand, it's not going to be received the same way. It's just different. You know?
Wait, did you have a suggestion for that? No.
It was this.
Oh, I didn't have a question. I just kind of just wanted to be appreciative of the moment. Because I feel like we have an opportunity to partner. So I'm a financial center manager at Fulton Bank in Millsboro, and to listen to Khalil talk about working with the gentlemen that have been incarcerated and come out, right? So they may have been going on 5 years, 10 years. For them to come out, the finance world is completely different, right? And being able to understand finances, even with small ones, right? Because you think of the cycles of the yelling, the cycles of how you spend money. It's all coherent, it's all together, right? And so if I see how my mom spent money, then I think this is how I'm supposed to spend money. If I see that I may be in subsidized housing, I don't realize that I can save money and get keys to own my own home. So I'm just very appreciative of the moment and taking in how we can partner and how we can build together, because the community and changing the community starts with 1 or 2, right? So we take this in Frankfurt, and thanks to TJ for, inviting me to be a part of this movement. So we can start in Frankfurt, and we can go to Millsboro, and then we can go to Seaford and Laurel and to the next place, and we can build upon that, and just strengthen in numbers allows us to be better people, right? Because the change has to start somewhere. And the change starts, and as we add it up, then we get stronger communities, and stronger communities have better neighbors, and we can just make a difference. So just thank for the moment and being appreciative of the moment.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I'm a deep person, so I don't want to be too deep, but I'll be quick. But your original question was, where does that come from? And it doesn't come from you? Does it come from your mom or your mom's mom? Historically speaking, how were we taught to? We were yelled at.
Right.
And we were yelled at to get a reaction, not a response. There's a difference. So when we look at historically how these things, communication lines have channeled from the beginning to now, 400 years ago to now, we're perpetuating those same things that we were taught into our kids. And I learned, I was for 7 years, the head basketball coach for Delmar High School. And I was the yeller as a coach. Like, I was very much, I'm a hardcore coach. I'm your traditional coach. I'm very hard, and I took pride in that until COVID hit. And I realized that I wasn't getting responses from kids, which I thought I was getting reactions. They were scared. They weren't showing up consciously. They were showing up because they didn't want to get in trouble. So when it was like middle of a game, they were just doing poorly, for lack of a better, just very poorly. And I stopped during halftime. I said, I'm not even going to go over strategy. I need to ask you guys what's going on. And this is a safe space. You can tell it to me how you feel, what's going on. They said, Coach, you keep yelling at us. At home, I got XYZ going on. I have this, I have that in school. My parents, one love, all these things are happening. You yelling at me actually causes me to shut down. It doesn't cause me to engage. From that moment on, I changed the entire way that I coached the rest of the season and seasons after that. Just because, one, you talked about creating a safe space, but I realized not only was I doing what I was taught, our bodies, whether we know it or not, holds trauma, and it doesn't hold the trauma that we've experienced directly. It's holding trauma from generations and generations and generations before us. That's why it's so important to break those generational curses, but also be aware of them and how they show up. So that's why I just want to lift that a little bit. Like, sometimes it's not even you; it's just how things were done throughout the years that we have the responsibility of breaking.
That was deep, but that was necessary. That was necessary. Thank you for that.
Anyone else? Nobody else? Okay. Well, before Miss Brandy and Mr. Khalil have a seat, I want them to introduce themselves formally, give a little bit of background about themselves, and then after that, we'll move on to some things.
Well, I'm Brandy Walker. I'm also Mrs. Magnolia for this year. June 1st, 4th, I don't know, something. I had competed for Mrs. Delaware America and came first runner-up. But my platform, even with that, was just mental health. And so I kind of mentioned to you guys before how I got into this field, and that was mainly because of my dad's experience and me wanting to help individuals, because I truly believe if he had someone if he sought his own counseling, he would probably still be here. He wouldn't have had to turn to drugs to kind of give him a temporary band-aid for the pain that he was feeling. And so that's kind of how I got in this field. I have my own private practice in Dover, Delaware called Resilient Soul LLC. And so we provide counseling services to individuals ages 12 to 64. Some in person, but predominantly we do video appointments. And so I also contract with Sussex Montessori Charter School, and so I go down there to provide counseling services to the I might have been. Yeah, so I've been with them. I think spring 2024 is when I started, and so I go down there during the week as well to provide counseling services and do different workshops. So they got the Youth Mental Health Summit coming up October 25th at Delaware State University. I'll be doing one of the workshops there. And so that's just really I see this as a ministry. It's, because I know my different challenges are, many times I've sat in the counseling room and things have come full circle for me, just from my own personal experiences. And that just lets me know that, okay, I'm right where I need to be. And so this is a ministry for me. I want to see people be able to thrive, despite whatever their challenges may have been. So, thank you for having me.
I was just sitting here thinking my mind was just racing. I have to get your information on how I can make referrals. So my name is A.R.I.S.E. I'm the founder and executive director of A.R.I.S.E, and it's a nonprofit I started 4 years ago. We do reentry coordination, coaching, and support for individuals transitioning to the community. And as I mentioned earlier, we also work with the Department of Corrections. I teach a class called The Impact of Crime on Victims, where I go into the institutions and we really try to help our participants understand the impact that their actions have not only on their victims but on families, communities, on a grander scale. I also do peer mentoring and training for the peers, recovery specialists in the institutions, and really trying to help them understand their role and give them some professional guidance so that when they transition from prison into the community, they can begin their careers stronger with a leg up as opposed to a leg down. And I have a program that I do that's sponsored by the Department of Education where I have a presentation called Black Boy Laws. I go into whatever schools they request and engage with the kids and the teachers to really try to help bring about better communication, because oftentimes the kids will share things with me that teachers are not aware of. And for example, I was at a school and they kept labeling them as the bad kids, that they stay in trouble. And when you get to engage with them, you find out that what y'all said, like these kids got a lot going on at home and in their communities, right? Like they're experiencing things, so they're not bad, they just don't know how to process and express what's going on with them. And instead of just isolating them and sticking them over here and saying that they're the bad kids, they can't be around normal kids. You have to have a better way to integrate them into the classroom. So I do that. And then I also am the outpatient program supervisor for Recovery Innovations, where I oversee mental health, housing, and crisis housing throughout the state of Delaware. Just trying to figure a way to help individuals struggling with addiction and mental health to have a safe place where they can live and to get in the treatment and give them the supports that they need.
Alright, so at this time, we're gonna take a little break, have some refreshments and, for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll start, our next, session, okay?